thought I'd seen the worst this world could offer until that morning, deep in Cedar Hollow Forest. The first light of autumn fell through the branches like a thin veil. No wind, no birds, only the sting of cold air and the damp scent of earth sinking through my boots. I strolled, savoring the silence that now looking back feels less like peace and more like a warning. I didn't see it at first, I felt it. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Beneath an old oak, something small hung suspended. At first, I thought it was just a plastic bag or a shirt caught in the branches, but a few steps closer, my heart locked in my chest. It wasn't a bag. It was a Doberman puppy small enough to fit between my hands. His body was frail, paper-thin, the light bleeding through the thin patches of fur to trace each rib. Something was looped tight around his neck, tilting his head to one side, his tiny frame dangling in the still air, silent, motionless, as if life itself had been trapped before my eyes. No bark, no cry. Only the faint rustle of leaves so soft it was almost reverent, as if the whole forest bowed its head before a sin. On the tree trunk a piece of paper fluttered, nailed there with rusted iron. I stepped closer. The wind lifted the edge, revealing a sentence scrawled in black marker. "He bit my kid. This is what he deserves." I froze. Then that stillness ignited into fire. My blood burned, fists trembling until my knuckles turned white. Someone actually thought that. Someone actually believed a puppy small as a heartbeat, fragile as breath, deserved this. My voice broke out raw, shaking. "You sick bastard. You monster wearing human skin." If anyone had passed by, they would have flinched at my face. I didn't know what was clawing its way up inside me. Rage, grief, or a need to kill the silence itself. I just knew I couldn't stand still. I stepped forward, one slow step at a time, the metallic tang of blood thick in the air. I didn't have to touch to know pain had lived here too long. Light filtered through the canopy lying over that small broken body like an accusation. My hands trembled. I couldn't tell if from fear or fury. That sight, the stillness, the absurd cruelty of those words felt like someone was testing whether I had any humanity left. I heard myself whisper through clenched teeth, "No, not today. You're not dying here, little one." I backed up a step, then another, searching for a way to reach him. My hand brushed the cold bark. The nailed paper tapped softly against the tree, clack, 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 like the sound of guilt knocking. I slipped a hand into my pocket, pulled out the old folding knife I always carried in the woods. My fingers shook so hard the blade shimmered in the sunlight. I placed it at the knot, my heartbeat a hammer in my chest. "Steady." "Evan," I whispered, "don't hurt him. Don't let him fall." When the steel met the rope, I heard it, a thin, broken breath, so faint it could have been wind through stone. I froze. Impossible. He was alive. Oh, God. I gasped, barely breathing. "You're still fighting. You're still here." In that moment, I knew I wasn't staring at a dying animal. I was witnessing a miracle, a small defiant spark of life refusing to surrender even when the world had already declared it worthless. My teeth dug into my lip. Tears burned behind my eyes. "Hold on, kid. I've got you. I'm getting you out of this hell." I began to cut. Slow, shaking, but relentless. Each slice of the blade sent a tremor through my chest. The light flickered. The wind whispered. The forest stayed silent. No one knew that morning in the heart of Cedar Hollow, two living souls, a man and a dying pup, were fighting to reclaim the one thing the world seemed to have forgotten: mercy. My name is Evan Miller, 43, a carpenter from Maple Ridge, Kentucky. I'm no hero. I'm not even the kind of man who always knows what to do. I'm just an ordinary guy living in a small wooden house at the edge of Cedar Hollow Forest where winters bite deep and summers hum with crickets. I live alone, the kind of alone that feels peaceful at first, then hollows the longer it echoes. Dinner is toast and cold soup. The clock's ticking is the only voice that answers me at night. I once had a friend, a dog named Ranger. He wasn't big or special, just a pair of eyes that knew how to listen, a warmth that curled beside my bed on nights when I couldn't bear my own silence. 3 years ago, Ranger died of bone cancer. I buried him myself at the edge of the woods under the old oak where the first light of morning slid through a single crack in the leaves. I never walked that path again. I told myself it was to forget, but the truth is I couldn't face the emptiness. People say time heals, but no one warns you how long the middle of healing feels. Until this morning. In the morning, everything I thought I'd buried with Ranger rose again. When I cut that rope, when I felt that faint warmth trembling in my hands, I realized I had never really left this place. The forest was the same, the wind still moved, but something inside me had shifted. I once swore I wouldn't get involved again. I was tired, I was old, and I had lost enough. But when I saw that creature, small, shaking, fading, I knew if I turned away, whatever was left of me would die with it. There are moments in life that don't need reasons. They're just right. I held that puppy close, the scent of earth, blood, and fear tangled together, but within it was something else, a fragile breath so real it made my heart twist. I didn't know how long he would last. I didn't know if I could do anything but try, but I knew I had to try. As I ran out of the woods, all I could see was the dirt road stretching toward town. The sky hung heavy with fog. Each step felt like a prayer. I'd never prayed before, but that morning I whispered, "God, don't let him die in my hands. I can't lose another one." When I reached town, I turned straight into Maple Ridge Animal Clinic. A small building, pale green walls, an old wooden sign that read Dr. Laura Kim, the only vet for miles. I kicked the door open. "Help him, please." Dr. Kim looked up from her desk. One glance, and her face went pale. No questions. She lifted the puppy gently, voice steady though her eyes were wet. "Give him here, quick." The door to the exam room swung shut. The sound of footsteps, metal instruments clinking, my heartbeat pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I stood in the waiting area, the sharp sting of antiseptic burning my nose. His blood was still on my shirt. That metallic scent made me feel like someone who had stolen a life back from the devil himself. I sat on the hard chair, hands clasped, eyes locked on the clock. The second hand crept forward, each tick slicing deeper. A voice in me whispered it was useless, that he was too small, too weak, and this world never played fair. But another voice, smaller, trembling, whispered back, "No, Evan, don't leave. Not this time." I looked up through the window. The noon light broke through the clouds, spilling over the grass outside. And in that moment I understood men like me, the ones who've lost more than they have, were not meant to witness more tragedies. We're meant to stop them. I clenched my fists, drew a long breath, and whispered more to myself than anyone. If he lives, I'll never let him be alone again. I don't remember how long I ran, only that my arms had gone stiff, locked tight around that tiny body, as if letting go would make him vanish. Every breath Scout took was so faint, I had to press my ear close just to catch it. Each time his chest stilled for half a second, my heart did too. I whispered between breaths, part prayer, part plea. "Hold on, kid. Don't give up. I'm here." My old pickup was parked at the edge of the woods. I yanked the door open, laid him on the passenger seat, and wrapped him in my jacket. The engine roared to life, but all I could hear was my pulse and his fragile breathing beside me. The road from Cedar Hollow to town had never felt this long. When I burst into Maple Ridge Animal Clinic, the door slammed against the wall. "Help him. Please help him." My voice cracked apart. Dr. Laura Kim looked up. One glance was enough. She lifted Scout gently, voice steady, though her hands trembled. "Give him here, quickly." I stood frozen as they carried him into the emergency room. The door shut. Metal clattered. Footsteps rushed. Then silence. The waiting room was white cold. The smell of antiseptic and steel made me sick. Dried blood stained my shirt. I stared at my shaking hands, guilt and fury rising together until I could barely breathe. Who could do this? Who could hang a helpless creature and walk away like tossing out trash? The words barely escaped my teeth. "You bastard. You heartless waste." Time warped, stretching thin. 5 minutes, 10, an hour. Every time the door opened, my heart jumped only to fall again as a nurse walked by. Outside, rain began to fall. Drops slid down the glass like tears. At last, Dr. Kim appeared. Her face was tired, but her eyes held a flicker of light. "He's breathing," she said. "Weak, but responsive. We're warming him and starting fluids." His back legs were constricted from blood loss, neck swollen, possible mild brain swelling, but if he makes it through the night, he'll live. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, voice small. "Can I see him?" She led me in. Scout lay inside an incubator, so small tubes trailing from his body. Every beep from the monitor was a fragile heartbeat caught between two worlds. I pulled a chair close, sat quietly. I didn't know what to say, so I whispered, "It's okay, Scout. I'm here. Sleep." I pressed my hand near the glass, not touching, just letting my warmth drift through. The room was silent save for the rain outside and his steady, tiny pulse. In that moment, I understood some lives are so small, yet they make people like me want to be better. I once thought the world had nothing left to believe in, but that morning in the rain and the smell of medicine, I knew I had found something again, hope. That night, I never left the room. The rain kept falling, each drop tapping on the metal roof like tiny shards of steel. Under the amber light, Scout's small body lay motionless inside the incubator, wrapped in gauze and IV lines, a little oxygen mask covering his muzzle. Dr. Kim walked in, her voice rough from hours without rest. His body temperature stabilizing, but I can't promise anything until morning. I nodded, unable to speak. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "If he makes it through the night, he'll have a chance. You've already saved him, Evan." I wanted to believe that, but looking at that fragile frame, I only felt guilt. Guilt for what people like us had done to a creature so defenseless. I pulled a chair close. All night I talked to him. I told him about Ranger, the old dog I'd lost 5 years ago, about autumn in Kentucky, the scent of freshly cut wood, and those quiet evenings in my shop, when he'd lie at my feet sleeping like the world could never turn cruel. My voice trembled, but I kept talking, letting whatever warmth I had drift across the cold air. Around 3 a.m., I saw a flicker of movement. A rough, shallow breath, but real. I looked up. Scout's head twitched. Dr. Kim rushed in. She checked the monitors, then exhaled, a tired smile breaking across her face. "Reflexes are back. This little guy's not giving up." I didn't even realize the tears had come. One fell against the glass, merging with the fog. "Good boy," I whispered. "That's it. You're stronger than the cruelty that made you bleed." 3 days later, Scout was moved to recovery. Still weak, but his eyes opened wider now, catching the light. Each time I entered, his ears perked up. Dr. Kim said softly, "He remembers your voice. It's like he's tied the sound of you to staying alive." I smiled faintly. I just say what he needs to hear. Every day I stayed to help the nurses, mixing water, cleaning kennels, and changing towels. Sometimes I just sat and watched him sleep. Once I saw him dreaming, pause, twitching muzzle, quivering as if barking in his sleep. I pressed my hand against the glass and murmured, "It's all right, Scout. You're safe now." A week passed. Scout could stand for a few seconds. Every time he fell, I caught him. Dr. Kim watched, half teasing, half sincere. I've never seen anyone this patient with a dog. I smiled, because no one's ever been patient with him. She nodded, her eyes soft. Sometimes kindness doesn't need to be loud. It just needs someone willing to stay. That afternoon, the rain stopped. I carried Scout out onto the porch, letting him taste his first breath of open air in days. Sunlight filtered through the trees, brushing across his patchy fur. He blinked, lifted his head, and took a slow, deep breath. And in that instant, I saw it, the change. He wasn't looking at me with fear anymore. That look was gone. It wasn't. I'm dying. It was, I want to live. I placed my hand on his head and smiled. Let's start over, shall we? He leaned forward and licked my fingers. A small motion, barely there, but I knew. That was hope finding its way back. The days that followed narrowed my life down to two things: woodwork and Scout. Everything else, work, friends, old habits, faded into the background. I never thought I could spend so much time just teaching a small creature how to trust again. The first day I brought Scout home, he trembled like a leaf. I set a small bed beside the stove, the warmest corner of the house. But he didn't lie down. He curled into the walleyes, tracking my every move. That night, he didn't sleep. Neither did I. The next morning, I sat on the floor, no calling, no staring. I just sat there reading the paper, sipping coffee, letting him get used to me simply existing. It took nearly a week before he would eat while I was in the room. Every gesture had to be soft, every sound quiet. If I closed a door too hard, he'd flinch and hide under the chair for hours. I learned to move more slowly, speak gentler, as if he was teaching me how to live softly again. One night while I was reading, I heard a faint sound. I looked down. Scout stood a few feet away, eyes uncertain, head lowered. I didn't call him, I just reached out my hand, silent. He stepped closer inch by inch, and rested his head on my knee. No music, no lights. No moment in my life had ever felt brighter. I stayed still, afraid even breathing too loud would break it. A dog, once hung by the neck muzzle taped shut, had chosen to trust a man. I knew then I'd just been given a miracle. From that day on, Scout began to change. He followed me into the workshop each morning, lying in the sawdust, the buzz of the saw now a kind of lullaby. Every time I reached for my hammer, he lifted his head like he was keeping watch. Some days he'd fall asleep under the workbench, his head resting against my old boots. In the afternoons, I walked him around the yard. His hind legs were still weak, his steps unsteady, but I cheered loudly each time he stood firm. Good boy, Scout. Every time he heard it, his tail wagged, small, shy, but enough to warm my heart. A month passed. He was different now. Still thin scars, still marking his neck, but those eyes, they shone. He no longer looked away from me. In fact, whenever I sat down, he ran over and pressed himself against my leg, as if afraid I might disappear. One night, thunder rolled. I woke to find him trembling in the corner. I got up, sat on the floor, and reached out. He looked up, hesitated, then crawled straight into my arms, chest pressed against mine like a child seeking shelter. I held him close and whispered, "It's okay. I'm here." We stayed that way until morning. And in that quiet dawn, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. The house that once held only wind now held breath and warmth. The next morning, I opened the door. Scout darted into the yard, sunlight spilling over his black and tan coat, still dusted with ash. He lifted his head, took a deep breath, and barked a single, strong, defiant sound. I stood there smiling. In a world so full of cruelty, that moment felt like a small miracle. A dog once hanged and left for dead was now barking at the sun. And I knew then, he wasn't the only one who'd been saved. 3 weeks after Scout came home, the little cabin no longer sounded empty. There were new noises now, the click of tiny paws on the floorboards, the soft clatter of a water bowl. the faint rhythm of another heartbeat in the dark. I never knew sound alone could make a man feel alive until now. Scout was bigger, heavier, stronger. Yet there was still something in his eyes, a tremor, a shadow that refused to leave. By day, he chased yellow leaves around the yard, bit my boots, and hid under the table like a thief caught mid-crime. But at night, when the house went still, the past came crawling back. That evening, the wind picked up. I was sanding a piece of oak when I heard it a faint whimper thin as wind through a crack. Then louder, ragged broken barks, claws scraping wood, the sound of panic unraveling. I ran. Scout was convulsing on the rug, eyes wide, breath erratic. He didn't see me. He looked through me, staring into some place only he remembered, where ropes burned and no one came. "Scout!" I shouted, my voice breaking. He didn't hear. His claws raked the floor, a strangled rasp clawing its way out of his throat. Instinct told me to grab him, hold him, but I remembered what Dr. Kim had said. Don't touch him when he's trapped in it. The nightmare still feels real. Use your voice. So I knelt, forcing my tone calm. "Scout, listen to me. You're not there anymore. You're home. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He kept trembling, gasping. I slowed my words, made them steady like a lullaby. "No one's going to hurt you again. You're safe. I promise." I said it again and again. The first time my voice shook. The next it didn't. And slowly, like a wire pulled too tight beginning to loosen, Scout softened. The tremors eased. His chest rose, fell, and then he crawled toward me, eyes wet, head low. I opened my arms and he folded into them. His whole body still quivered, but not from fear, only exhaustion. I held him, said nothing. Just listened to the heartbeat against mine and realized not every wound lives on the surface. Some pain needs only a sound to wake it. The next day, I went to see Dr. Kim. She nodded as I spoke. "It's normal, just like people, Evan. We dream about what we'd rather forget. Your job isn't to erase it, it's to be there when it comes." I was quiet for a while, then asked, "Do you think he'll ever forget?" She looked toward the window, her voice barely a whisper. "No one truly forgets. But sometimes we learn to see the pain in a different light." That night, I did something strange. I took the old rope Dr. Kim had kept, the one once wound around Scout's neck, and brought it outside. I laid it in the grass not far from where Ranger was buried. Scout stood beside me, ears low, eyes fixed on it. "It's okay," I said softly. "This isn't to scare you. It's to end it." I dug a small hole. Scout watched uneasy. When I dropped the rope in, he stepped forward, sniffed, and barked a single trembling sound that hung in the air like a declaration. I covered the hole, my hands shaking, and pressed a dry blade of grass into the soil. Scout sat down beside me, breathing steady, eyes calm. I understood. He had just learned how to close a chapter. That night, for the first time since leaving the clinic, Scout slept without flinching. I watched him curled at the foot of the bed, breathing slowly, his ears twitching in the breeze. Outside, the moon hung over the treetops of Cedar Hollow, the place where it all began. I whispered, "Sleep well, Scout. We're out of the woods now." The next morning, light spilled through the window. I took Scout outside. The air was cold but clear. We walked the dirt road where the forest opened into a field of golden grass. Scout stopped, lifted his head, drew a deep breath, then turned to me, tail wagging hard. I smiled. And I understood the miracle wasn't that he'd survived. It was that after everything, he still knew how to love. That afternoon, I carved a single line into my wooden journal. No one can go back and change the beginning, but we can always start again and write a different ending. Beneath it, I etched two names, Evan and Scout. Winter came early that year. But strangely, the cold didn't cut the way it used to. Maybe because now inside my little wooden house there was another breath, steady, warm, and honest. Scout had grown. His coat shone again. His legs were strong, and the scar around his neck had faded to a pale line, like a quiet reminder that some pasts can't be erased, only transformed into marks of strength. Every morning while I made coffee, Scout raced around the yard barking at the sparrows. That bark, rich, full alive, was a sound I once thought I'd never hear again. Dr. Kim still stopped by every weekend. She looked at Scout and smiled. "He's a different dog now. I think he's become the pride of Maple Ridge." I grinned, ruffling his fur. "Yeah, and my teacher too." One December afternoon, I took Scout back to Cedar Hollow. We stopped where everything began. The old oak still stood there alone in a field of silence. Sunlight slanted through the fog, laying gold and silver patches on the ground. Scout stood close to my leg, sniffed the air ears high, but he wasn't afraid. I pulled a small wooden plaque from my coat, one I'd carved myself. On it were just a few words. Here, something cruel ended and something kind began. I pressed it into the soil and patted the earth around its base. Scout looked at me, then leaned forward and licked my hand. I laughed. "Yeah, buddy, we're not here to remember pain. We're here to remember that kindness won." Time passed. News of Scout's story spread through the town. People sent letters, toys, and food. Children who once feared dogs now came every weekend just to pet him. An old widow at the end of the street told me, her voice trembling, "Your story gave me hope." I lost my son. I thought there was nothing left worth believing. But seeing this dog survive, I realized some things in us don't die. I could only smile. Words wouldn't come, because it was true. Scout didn't just survive, he brought life back to everyone around him. One night I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, Scout resting beside me, his head on my knee. The wind carried the scent of wood and smoke through my jacket. In the distance, the lights from town shimmered through the fog like fallen stars. I said softly, half thinking, aloud, half speaking to him, "People say dogs can't talk, but the truth is they know more than all of us combined. They know what loyalty is, what pain is, and they know how to forgive." Scout lifted his head, eyes clear as glass, looking at me. I chuckled, stroking his head. "Yeah, I know. You want me to stop philosophizing, huh?" He gave a short bark tail, wagging gently. We both laughed. I wasn't afraid of silence anymore. Because now, silence held the sound of Scout's breathing, the crackle of the fire, and the quiet belief that sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to turn away to make the world different. Dr. Kim called it the double redemption effect. Man saves dog, dog saves man. But I think it's better called the ripple of compassion. Because when kindness is given, it doesn't vanish, it multiplies. One morning, Scout and I went to the local rescue center. I started volunteering a few days a week, repairing kennels, building wooden frames, and sometimes just sitting to read stories to the other dogs the same way I once did for him. The kids in town began calling me the storyteller of Maple Ridge, and whenever someone asked, I'd smile, point to Scout, and say, "Not me. He's the one who taught me how to tell stories." Eventually, I decided to share our story online, not for fame, but so people would remember that miracles aren't always bright and loud. Sometimes they're just a faint breath in the woods that someone cared enough to stop and hear. If Scout's story touched your heart, I wrote, share it. Because somewhere out there, a life is waiting for someone to stop. Someone like you. Someone who still believes the world holds kindness. Join our Paws and Us family. Be a voice for the voiceless. Scout lifted his head as I typed the last words. His eyes were calm, bright, certain the eyes of a soul who had come back from the darkest corners of humanity, carrying proof that light still wins. I closed the laptop, patted his head, and whispered, "We did it, buddy." He barked once. Outside, snow began to fall. The first flakes drifted down like soft breaths blanketing the porch in white. Inside the cabin glowed warm and golden like a heart newly restored. Thank you for walking with me and Scout through this story. I know maybe you cried, maybe you got angry, maybe your chest tightened, seeing what people can do to something innocent. But if you're still here listening to these last lines, it means your heart is still beating for something good. And that is what keeps the world alive with hope. Scout wasn't just a dog who survived. He's proof that kindness can still win even if it has to walk through hell to find its way back. Every day, I watch him running across the yard, light in his eyes, and I think of all the people out there, the ones who didn't turn away, the ones like you. If Scout's story moved you, share it. Because somewhere in another forest or down another empty road, there's still a soul waiting for someone like you to stop. Leave a comment with your city's name so we'll know that across this country compassion is still alive. Subscribe, not for the numbers, but because every subscription helps us tell one more story about life, kindness, and the quiet miracles that still happen every day. And if you can support your local rescue groups, the people who do good in silence without spotlights, without fame, all it takes is one more hand, one bowl of food, one heart willing to care.